Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So wonderful to have you here. My name is Kelly Keena, and I am the board president of the Morpho Institute. And I am delighted to be here. We're so grateful for the invitation to join you all. We have a really great session for you today and some incredible people here on the panel who I'll introduce in just one moment. But first, I really want to introduce the Morpho Institute. The mission of our organization is to support the key role of education in realizing the global goal of Amazon conservation and sustainability. And we do this by providing U.S. teachers with transformative professional development, which we're really going to define that today, creating and sharing effective teaching resources about the Amazon, and supporting on-the-ground conservation initiatives in Peru. This summer, we are celebrating 10 years of this work. And in those 10 years, over 200 teachers have participated in our Keystone Field Course program, transforming their professional and personal lives in just 10 short days. We do this with really incredible partners. We work in the northeast region of the Peruvian Amazon near the Ecuadorian border. We partner with Explorama, a series of lodges along the Amazon and Napo rivers, and the Amazon Conservatory of the Tropics, or for Tropical Studies, which we refer to as ACTS. This is home to the Canopy Walkway, where we have unfettered access. And we also partner with CONAPAC, and we have a panelist from CONAPAC here today, who you'll hear more about shortly. This is a Peruvian nonprofit community organization who is aligned in our mission of education and conservation. Our professional development is led by researchers and scientists, teaching experts, expert Peruvian guides from the Amazon basin, and the Mahuna Indigenous community, who are the protectors of over 1 million acres of primary growth rainforest and their ancestral homelands through the federally recognized Mahuna Quechua Regional Conservation Area. We like to say that teachers come for a 10-day experience and gain a network for a lifetime. We work with teachers to integrate this transformational professional development into their home community classrooms through place-based education strategies and field research skills. Our alumni network contributes to scholarly articles about their experience, and they connect to create curriculum resources for teachers who are not able to travel with us to the Amazon. So all teachers have access to high quality, free, and reliable resources about the natural and cultural dimensions of the Amazon rainforest. To learn more about this, there's a link in the chat, morphoinstitute.org. And we'll be dropping links in the chat as resources come up in the discussion today. So keep your eye on that as well. All right, I'm going to introduce our fabulous panelists today. Ava Goodale facilitates a research collaborative and education program at the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies in New York, and she has over 10 years experience as a science educator. Megan McDaniel is a former secondary high school science teacher from Colorado and is the new executive director of CONAPAC, a nonprofit community organization based in the Amazon rainforest city of Iquitos, Peru. Ro Ruiz has a diverse background that intermixes education, recreation, and the environment. She has a teaching appointment at California State University, Fresno, and spent 10 years in the land conservation field. Ro is an NAI certified interpretive guide and California naturalist. So welcome everybody, welcome to our wonderful panelists. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see everybody's awesome faces, and we'll get going in this discussion. So my first question for you all, and you can kind of help establish who you are in this response for everybody, is it's World Rainforest Day. Why should we teach about the Amazon in the US and in Peru? Because Megan's here teaching about the Amazon in Peru. Why? Why are we here? Why are we doing the work that we do? Who wants to start?
I'll start.
I love it.
I think I mean, it's just like, wow, it's an incredibly diverse area with some amazing natural resources and ecological services that we can be learning about and teaching about. And I really feel like knowledge of the rainforest can help open our eyes to the parallel challenges in our local regions.
Excellent. Yeah, and thanks, Ro. I think there's a really important component of the work that we do, which is taking the global and making it local, right? So how do we make the bridges between what's happening in South America, what's happening in the Amazon rainforest, and how do we apply that back in our home communities? That's great. Megan, do you want to jump in?
Sure. For me, the rainforest is just a really engaging topic. Students love to dive into it, even when they don't have personal experience in a rainforest. And I think it's partly because of what Ro just said. There's so much biodiversity to explore, so much to see and do regarding the topics of the rainforest. And, you know, it's great to apply those parallels, those comparisons, those ideas of what is place. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go too.
Awesome. That's excellent. Eva.
Hi, everybody. I think what really excites me about this event and talking about rainforests and traveling to rainforests is how it provides an opportunity to think about environmental stewardship in a different way. And that is really by sort of infusing stewardship with global citizenship. And I think that is similar to what we're all saying, that this sort of global extension, and because the rainforest does just like draw you in, you can't help but immerse yourself in it. It really does allow students or teachers, really anyone, to then flip that global experience back on themselves and their own lives and their own place. And to me, that's really where the transformation happens. So it's an interesting question. I think we're all saying a similar thing, that really World Rainforest Day and why we're so excited about rainforest is actually for what it provides us when we go back home to rethink our place in the world.
That's great. And I wonder if each of you has like a little bit of a story to tell about your first experience in the Amazon, or your first, kind of awe moment where you could pull that back to your home community. Like, what was your experience like when you first went with the Morpho Institute?
I can jump in. I would say my first experience with the Amazon happened long before I traveled there. So I, as a child, got caught up in, I think, the movement of the 90s in sort of rainforest education. But I fell in love with the Amazon before I ever went there. And it really did shape my experience as a young person. And then I was able to travel to Peru when I was 14 through, a connection to the Morpho Institute. That's a long story. But that's where the transformation started for me. And then when I traveled with the Morpho Institute, it really, that first time that I was there, it actually felt like returning to a place that felt like home, even though I really had not spent that much time there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it goes, that hearkening back to like the Save the Rainforest movement of the 90s and how we revive that, and also, fill it out with, save the rainforest because, this kind of idea. Ro, I know you have a really great story too that led to your dissertation. Like, what was your experience?
Well, I'm trying to just think of like a experience, but it was really just the entire experience. And we read and watched videos and listened to podcasts, and so we came with some knowledge of the rainforest, and I felt comfortable with some knowledge. But once we got on the river and then stepping foot into the jungle, I was just literally in awe. I suddenly realized that I had so much to learn, and I couldn't even begin to explain. I mean, you take a picture of what the jungle looks like as you're hiking through it, because it's just, greener than green, and the trees are, so tall. And literally, I looked at the picture, I'm like, this is not what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing. And for me, especially that first hike through the jungle, that really connected with our giant sequoia groves here back home. And I immediately thought of, how I could literally get my students excited about being in something so amazing. And really from there, I mean, everything of that first trip was so transformative. Just, and even just being able to experience that with others, having that first experience also kind of just reinforced just the amazing experience we were having there, just learning. It was just, sorry, I just feel tongue-tied. I'm just so impressed with everything we did.
Yeah, I mean, this what in education speak, what we call community of practice, and establishing that connection. And what we find through our organization is that, we forge these friendships and connections and professional collaborations as a result of being there and having these sort of awesome experiences. And how we take that back. Ro, I have a connection, going back and seeing the sequoias. I live in Colorado, and coming back, and I have spent more time on my local river since I started going to the Amazon, because I'm thirsty for that experience more often in my life. Yeah. And Megan, how about you? You have a really great story as well.
Well, I can echo everything that Ro and Ava just said. Like, all of those same sentiments are very similar to me. My first experience was overwhelming, to be frank. It was so much to take in. But for me, it was the people and the connection with people, not only amongst the cohort of the Educator Academy, but also with people I met along the way. So our guides, the people in the community that we visited. And I couldn't help but take all of those experiences and just say to myself, my students need to come here. They need to visit this space, see what this is like, find all of those same things that we're all talking about right now, this connection to the rainforest, and use that as a driving force in their own lives. That was my biggest and greatest hope, right? So I ended up bringing students through a lot of hard work, but I got students here, and then experiencing it all over again through their eyes for the first time was so amazing. And again, I go back to people. We love the rainforest, and we're here celebrating the rainforest today. We cannot forget that people live here too, right? Which is the driving force behind why I am sitting in Iquitos, Peru right now, working for CONAPAC. There are people who live here too. And we can't just take the rainforest as a biome separated from the people. We have to bring that people connection back in. And as I continued my teaching career until I did finally leave, I tried to incorporate that into everything I was teaching in science, not just about the rainforest.
Yeah, and I'll say, it's a good point, because we do attract a lot of science teachers, because we are there is a natural connection to the ecology of the rainforest. But once we're there, we really do start to unpack the dimensions of the place where we are standing. And so, Megan, just to come back and follow up on what you said, how do we help our students, and how do we help our audiences, for lack of a better term, because we're all working in different settings? How do we help them understand and help them learn that there are there are deep interconnections between the cultural dimensions of this place and the ecological dimensions of this place?
That's a really great question, Kelly. And I think it's a little difficult to answer fully in a short phrase, right? But I think the main thing to really do is find the connections that make people understand. So our students, our audiences, whoever that is, understand that people are more alike than they are different. We all have hopes and dreams in our worlds. We all have fears. We all have things that we desire in our lives. And that could be as simple as, my children being able to go to school and live happy and healthy. We are more alike than we are different. It's very easy to look at the people who live in the communities here in the Amazon as different. It's an us versus them. But the less we see that, the more we peel away all of that and see that we are connected as a human species, then we can start to dissolve those barriers, and we can start to talk about how lives are impacted here in the Amazon when you live so far away in another country. There's an interconnectedness that you got to dig into and find.
Yeah, and we got to stop looking at ecology separate from humans, right? We have to start, because we're all dependent on those things. And I think the Amazon gives us a really lovely way to reflect that, right? Ava, I know you've done work with this too, with students, and trying to really integrate people and place. What have you done, and how do we do this?
Yeah. I think that when I was in Peru with the Mayahuna in their community, they were able to express those connections in such clear and tangible ways. So when I returned to my classroom and started working with students, what I ended up doing was writing a series of interdisciplinary multimedia case studies in collaboration with the Morpho Institute and several others. And those case studies are on the Morpho Institute's website and fully accessible to everyone. But really the main point of them is to forge that connection between people and place, and really letting the Mayahuna take center stage in those case studies. So they're all written in second person as if the reader is in Peru. But overall, they are an opportunity, ideally, for the reader or the student to experience the Amazon as best they can without actually leaving their classroom. And I think what helps forge that connection between people and place are two aspects of the Mayahuna story. One is optimism. It's an incredible conservation success story. And students, I think, feel that empowerment coming from the Mayahuna. And the second part of that is empathy, that through that type of learning material, they really can empathize with the Mayahuna and imagine sort of they have that being transposed out of their own viewpoint. And I think it was at least those two pieces that allowed students to have transformative experiences without leaving the classroom. And it certainly is not to the extent as if they were able to be there in person with the Mayahuna. But those case studies, I did a couple of research projects to measure student engagement and outcomes from them. And they were really powerful. And I think that is because of the Mayahuna and how they were able to forge that connection between people and place.
Yeah, and Ava, I wonder if you could just talk briefly about the way that those were developed, because the risk that we always face, right? And I know Megan and Ro, you've talked about this too, is that it's not us telling the Mayahuna story. We're not part of it, right? Like we're not part of the federal protection that was given through a lot of work to the 1 million acres of primary growth rainforest and ancestral homelands. So how did you navigate creating case studies that were not you telling their story, but the Mayahuna having the opportunity to share their story from their perspective?
Yeah. So I was trying to be very careful about that, and also trying to be careful about traditional ecological knowledge, and that often as soon as you start writing about it or teaching about it, you've actually abstracted the idea from its core. So I was trying to walk that line in developing these. And one way I tried to do that was through storytelling. So the case studies have a series of vignettes that proceed through the case study. And they're really sort of written from my experience listening and observing with being with the Maihuna. So that was one way of doing it. But then the other was the case studies are really not about now save the Maihuna or fix something in the rainforest. That intention was really never there, like asking students now go fix this complex international problem. It really, the whole design was like you've toggled between this faraway place with this new group of people, and now return it back to your home place and yourself. So it really was, the purpose was about for students to develop their own stories and their own experiences. The case studies had a citizen science component towards the end. We did mapping activities within the case study. But it really is sort of creating just space for the Maihuna to be role models, but really just for the students to then reflect on what that means for themselves, not what it means for what they could do, sort of in this faraway place.
Great. All right. Thank you for explaining that. I think that's a really critical point for all of the work that we do. And Ro, I know you've thought so much about this too. We call this decolonizing the curriculum, right? Like we have a lot of work to decolonize, not just STEM curriculum, not just science curriculum, especially in US schools. And in our work to decolonize places, we're also doing it in our teaching resources. Ro, I just wonder if you could talk about, what that means to you. How do we effectively weave Indigenous ways of knowing into our academic teaching and learning? And, what has been your experience there?
I really like how Ava kind of framed it, that we're not trying to fix something. We're trying to embrace something that has been around for a very long time. And I think through hearing those stories from Indigenous people themselves, and not, like you said, trying to be part of that story is really important. And I know I'll kind of go back a little bit about our participants, our teachers that come out to experience our professional development. I do recall in research, one of the instructors talking about, she had second graders, and she took her stories of her experience in the village while we were working with the students and how they showed us their school, and we did activities with them. And she shared her pictures and her stories with her students, emphasizing that there's really not this huge difference. These are students, and her students literally said they're just like me, but they get to be in a garden, because she had pictures of the traditional garden, and they had a school garden. So there was a lot of parallels and opportunities to show how, though we're worlds apart, so to speak, we have so much in common, and a respect for just wanting to know, like, what are they doing, and wow, how can we or do this or learn more about this. I know in my region, we do a lot with, we have a variety of Indigenous groups that are very active. And so just in hearing the stories of the Maihuna, it was exciting to come back and find local Indigenous groups that were wanting to share. It's an invitation. And I think kind of walking that same line, it's like not being pushy of, I need you to come and, help out here. No, it's, would you be willing to, teach us, share with us, and just kind of be open and embrace what they have to offer, and not necessarily, guiding that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I have a colleague who used to say, be slow to speak and quick to listen. And I feel like it is an important, like, foundational skill for the work that we do in Peru, and also coming back and listening to the stories as well as telling them. Yeah, thanks, Ro. That's great. I mean, I think about now we, and this is really interesting for you, Megan, because we think about when we go to Peru and we come back to our locale, right? And how do we make it relevant and meaningful here? And for Megan, it was to go from the US to Peru and having it, happen in reverse. So, how do we make, so the rainforest, and especially in early place-based education, we talked about how, when things are really far away, especially from younger students, they're far away in abstraction as much as they are in distance, right? And so even with secondary students, how do we reduce that distance and make the rainforest relevant and meaningful, less far away?
Kelly, just to be clear, are you asking in regards to teaching back in the US or having brought students to Peru? There's a slightly different answer for each of those.
No, I think it's a great question, Megan. For you, I think it would be like bringing students to Peru and then going back, because you have that unique lens. I know Ava's brought students there too, but for Ava and Ro, just as Megan's responding, thinking about then how do we make it less far away when we're back here? Yeah. So Megan, I would say your experience with bringing students is really important for everybody to hear.
I think that my intention was to preload what I could without minimizing the magic of the journey. So we did lots of comparative thinking before the students came. We talked about biomes and forest biomes and compared data, so more science-based data at home between the two types of forests, the rainforest, and I was also in Colorado, so Colorado's forests, and then designed questions based on what students had just learned in those preview days that they might want to investigate here in the rainforest. So we took learning at home and brought it with us to the Amazon. And then they ran those same investigations in the Amazon: air quality, water quality, trying to define the biome, what kind of measurements they could take or observations they could do. And then packaged that back up, took it back home to Colorado with us, and continued to think about Colorado's environment and biome. So we didn't just leave it as, okay, there are these two separate places. My intent was to interweave it as much as possible back and forth, so that it wasn't so starkly different, that they had some basis of understanding before we got there. And I feel like, and my students would need to answer this question, but I feel like preloading it really, really helped them when they were here. However, they were still full of tons of questions. They still had moments of, oh my gosh, what is happening to me right now? I mean, there was still a lot to be in awe of and observe. So it wasn't at all that I was removing any of that magic.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's funny, one of our faculty shared this quote the other day, that it's like it's not, and I can't remember who it's from, so I'm not going to guess, but that it's not the, oh, I found out, like, oh, I found this. It's actually more the like, what is this? Why is this? How is this? That's what we look for when we want to see inquiry and discovery and wonder, because we all, that's the beginning, right? That's the beginning of the learning. And it's often the end of the learning because we get more questions. Yeah, that's awesome. Ro, how do you bring it back and make the distance seem less distant?
One way that I bring it back is through sharing my story, and sharing. I use a lot of like short videos and photos, and just really kind of talking about what we experienced And I find that, I was fortunate to create a personal connection with the Amazon being there. But my students have a personal connection with me. And so the more I can make it a rich story, and, it's about being vulnerable. It's about telling the scary story as well, or the silly story of, something that may have happened that makes them, maybe laugh or smile. And they just want to know more, or tell us, did you see this? Or, just more questions, as you said, just the questioning. And I've also found that other colleagues that I spoke to really were able to engage their students with their own photos and stories and videos. And I think that connection, I really think everything is just loaded with connection. And connection was a major theme that came out of my research, whether it was cultural, natural resources, our colleagues. So when we come back and we create that connection with our students, our students are connected to us and what we're willing to share. And so that is one way that I bring it back.
Great. Yeah, I'm hearing stories and comparisons. I love that. And just want to call out, there was a science and storytelling session as part of World Rainforest Day to make sure that everybody checks that out. Ava, how about you?
Yeah, I would piggyback on those ideas. I think there has been a lot written about how powerful teachers' role is when we model our own identities as environmental stewards or global citizens, that is part of the environment that shapes students to follow that. And I think in the last 2 or 3 years, initially I tried to actually step back from that, trying to be more scientific about not involving myself in the research I was doing. But I really learned that that's a critical component, that the teacher, especially with students having emotional connections to the teachers in the room, that's a really critical component. So I definitely am in agreement with you, Rao, there. I think the other two things that I've really focused on is, if I'm teaching students about the aguaje palm and how bioculturally important it is to the Maihuna, students really understand that when we go then look at oak trees and spend time with them. In our case, we were able to climb up in them in our school's canopy walkway. But once they could then dig into the biocultural importance of our own species in our own backyard, then they could return to the Maihuna and say, I get it now. I just kind of scratched the surface of what an oak tree means to me. And now I can sort of understand what it might mean to the Maihuna in an even bigger context. So again, having that personal experience where they could go live it themselves, sort of broke down that abstraction of this far off place and this random tree, right? An aguaje palm is absolutely random to them. And then the third piece, I mentioned it before, is empathy. Students respond to emotions. That's the part of storytelling that is so powerful. And it is that person-to-person connection that can start to blur the lines between local and global, and make far away places feel more real and relevant to students. But yeah, I think that again was when I was teaching and really trying to change things deliberately, empathy and perspective taking were the two places that I hit the hardest and feel like I saw the biggest gains.
That's fantastic. And I just want to call out that in the chat are links to all of those curriculum resources that we have available that everybody's talking about here. So make sure you go check those out. All of you have done such incredible work and worked so hard to make these connections for your communities. We do, Morpho's mission is education for Amazon conservation. How do we get to the conservation part in our work? where are we going in targets to make sure that that Amazon conservation, biocultural conservation, is the outcome of all of these efforts? It's a big one. Who wants to start?
I mean, I'll start, and I don't know if this is heading in the same direction, but again, to me, it's not asking students to go directly save the Amazon. It's asking them to take action in their own backyards. So we were doing all these citizen science projects that I've done for years, right? They're very, sort of your go-to environmental science curriculum, which is phenomenal. But what I changed was adding this global dimension. And in changing that, there was this idea that students could come away with that is about a shared endeavor, that they're not contributing their eBird bird list just for the sake of it, or even just for New York State. They're doing it because it is in connection to the Mayahuna or Peru, or the thousands of people around the world doing similar things. And that's where sort of global citizenship comes up, that it is really about this shared endeavor, a shared obligation, a shared responsibility to act, and that we're no longer doing it in isolation. It's not about like my individual efforts, it's about our collective action. And so even the actions that I do in New York State or wherever we may happen to be, helping students to see that they are a node in this vast network of stewards, and the Mayahuna are part of it, and we're part of it, and you can go on from there. So, and I guess also to see that is conservation that helps the rainforest, that it is all this shared endeavor. We're all after the same thing because we have this shared humanity, Ro, like you were talking about. So that I feel like is a real circular answer to getting there. But that's how I feel we hit the mission there.
Yeah, I mean, David Sobel talks about we can't ask people to save what they don't love, right? And save, right? There's that word again, but we can't ask people to care about what they don't understand. And so I think that's kind of a core component of this. The other one is, talking about authentic audiences, relevance, and meaning. And all of these things are kind of core educational concepts that we have that radiate out beyond our work and into the conservation. Ro, how about you? Where do you think that action component comes in? Oh, muted. You're muted.
Sorry about that.
No, thank you.
Working in conservation for as long as I have, I kind of came with that lens and hearing about, for example, the issues of access going through areas of land that they're trying to conserve. I mean, it immediately brought me right back into my own local region and with access issues and what that means. And for me, this was an opportunity to kind of make these connections across disciplines for my students. So these are very complex issues as far as conservation goes. It's not just we're going to save this area of land. There are political things that we have to consider. There are economic things that we have to consider, cultural things, all these things that are impacted. There's social implications. And many times my students are completely unaware that there's more to it. And so when we start talking about our own choices, this is what, I totally get what Ava was talking about as far as what we choose to do impacts things on a much larger scale. And so for me, that aspect of conservation is really just kind of taking the blinders off and helping students see these complex issues. Now, of course, I'm speaking of students that are, in the developmental stage where they can make these connections. But that for me is one way that I came back with that conservation lens and how to bring light of, hey, this is happening in the Amazon, and what's happening here in your own region, and so what are some of the things that you can do here that are actually going to make an impact there as well.
Yeah, I love that, Ro. And, it's interesting. I just want to call out that the folks on this panel, we all work along the continuum of kindergarten through college. And Colleen in the chat said, environmental science standards are not mandatory in Kentucky. So we can't make these assumptions that students come to Ro in the university with all of these skills and all of this knowledge. In some cases, they can developmentally make those connections, but they may not have the background. And so they may be getting their first impression with you. So every level along the continuum, I think, is really critical as well. Megan, I know, again, you have this kind of unique lens, and I wonder if you could talk about this conservation piece through the work that CONAPAC is doing, and we're doing together when we're there around conservation education.
Sure. So CONAPAC focuses our efforts on our partner communities. That means that we work directly with the people who live in the rural Amazon here in Peru. And our major project is conservation education. It is environmental education. And what we aim to do is provide resources for the teachers in our partner communities to be able to teach relevant environmental education within the confines of the Peruvian education needs, right? And really what we've seen is through a cooperation with other organizations, including Cornell University Lab of Ornithology, is that when you draw kids in to what is around them and allow them to ask questions about what is around them, and then support them through the discovery of the answers or the more questions that those questions lead to, right? We all know questions make more questions, not answers. That students really get engaged and they really want to know more, and they dive full headfirst into it. And so our mission in CONAPAC is really supporting the people who live here, because they are the first line of defense of the forest on the ground. And really our aim is to inspire the next generation of guardians here. And I am not here to tell the teachers what to teach. That's not my job. We're here to support the teachers through their needs in their schools in environmental education. And I think you can say the same if you think about that, if you're teaching anywhere else in the world, right? Isn't that really what you want? Is to somebody to support you through your needs in your place as well. And when you put it in the lens of environment, then perhaps through that teaching and that supporting of students through their questioning, that your students will gain an awareness that can inspire further actions like conservation. Do we think we're going to hit every student every time and that every student is going to, be a warrior for conservation? Probably not. But our hope is that we hit the ones that will make a difference later on, that people stop and think about their action and the implications of it, whether it's here in the Amazon or wherever you all live, right? Isn't that really what we desire? People to stop and think about their actions before a consequence occurs.
Yeah,
and that's
I love
the hope
that.
here.
That's great. Thanks, Megan. And, CONAPAC is an impressive organization. The link in the chat, Krista and Nancy are on it. They've got these links going. Thank you for that. I think it's a really important, there's two things I'm thinking about. One is if the outcome is that people see themselves as part of the places that they live in, that's the seeds for conservation. The other is this idea of supporting educators, supporting teachers. And if you are a teacher, big shout out to you. We know you need all the love and support right now because of the last few years. And so that idea that an organization supports is really, I think, crucial. All right, I'm looking at the time. By the way, I could talk to you all day. This is so fascinating, and thank you so much. I want to open it up to the folks in the audience. You can use the chat to put a question in there for any of our panelists. Or you can also, we can tap into this cool networking feature that we have here in this platform. You can request to come on camera to share your experiences. And so I'm going to give everybody a moment to formulate their questions, put them in the chat, or jump into the moderated part of the networking. And just give everybody a moment for that. While we're waiting for that, let's see. A lot of gratitude coming in. Yeah, and Colleen, if you want to jump in to, I think you will pop up on my screen. I believe that there is a button to request to come on. I'm going to give that a minute. Yep, there it is. There she is. So Colleen Epperson was a teacher that came down with the Morpho Institute a few years ago. And so Colleen, what did you want to add to the discussion?
Okay, so you can see me, right? And hear
I can
me.
see you and hear you. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, cool. So I was just jotting some notes down. So, I mean, all of you all, because I've either worked with you in the Amazon. Ro and I were there together. Megan was there with us, and Ava, I've chatted with you and worked with your curriculum. And Kelly, I think you and I had a long discussion one time when I was involved. But so all of you all, thank you all, because the reason why I went to the Amazon was because I was teaching about things that I did not have experience in, and it felt very weird to me. And I wanted to be able to bring that experience to my students. And so it was life-changing, and it was amazing. And the networking and all of that has just inspired me to be what I think was, even during the pandemic, one of the best 4 years that I had after. I am retiring now, but that's a whole nother story as to why. But from all of this, I can just say some things that I had the confidence to do, because you all are so, like, I mean, I'm like an on the ground, hit the ground running kind of teacher. But the ideas and all of the things that you all have brought together. And I remember sitting on the boat with Rose with her little notebook at the beginning of the trip, and she's just writing everything down. And I'm like, I just can't take all this stuff in fast enough. But what has come out of it for my students is I was able to teach an elective class called Sustaining the Environment. And that's where we use the case studies. And the students were very inspired by all of that. And from that, we did a follow-on project. We were planting trees, studying our own watershed, creating access to our creek in the back because they wanted to get out there. We were putting camera traps out. We were collecting data. We were collecting a lot of data. Like, that was like the big thing. And then, of course, Christy and Jess moved to Cincinnati. So I got to connect with them. And last summer we had a STEM Institute, and we did exactly what Megan was just talking about. We put the kids out there in the environment. We camped with them one night, but we explored and observed, and they asked a ton of questions, and then were able to come up with researchable questions that they could then go out and collect data. And this was in like literally 36 hours. It was it was all encompassing too, because with the bug chicks, they were able to, and I know they're coming to the Amazon this summer. So I hope that they will fill you in on all of this down there with the new educators. But that was just two big things that have come out of it. And, you know, I've been to a lot of professional development, and I, you know, sit through an hour long or 2 hours or whatever, and I get all this great stuff and then can't implement it or don't have time to implement it or don't have the meat, or, you know, whatever, it just doesn't work out. But I do feel like this, and I'm still here. So I'm retiring, but I'm trying to figure out where my next place is going to be, because I still feel very passionate about what you all are doing and what there is to be done. And, you know, hopefully I'll be able to get back in some sort of educator role.
That's
So
great.
I just wanted to give that testimonial from my end of it. So
I love it. Thanks, Colleen. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
you.
Yeah, I mean, and so good to see you. One of the things that we found through a retrospective study, so we did a study of alumni, and we found that exactly what Colleen and everybody here has alluded to, that we know that this is an intense ecosystem and it's very different than where we all live in the US. And that takes time for teachers to process, all of us. So we find that there are days and months and years after the experience that people are still processing. So thanks, Colleen. All right, we have, let's see, Zach, I want to help you get on camera so that you can ask your question. So I believe, oh, there you are. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let Zach in. And all right, hi, Zach. How are you?
Hello, I'm Zach. And this
Hi.
is what's
Okay,
going
cool.
on. Thanks
How
for
are you?
bringing us on. We're doing fantastic. We love what we're hearing. And it's just crazy how everything's connected, because you're touching on teaching, you're touching on the children, which I find is a huge component in all these effective organizations where, you know, you have your focal species that obviously relate to someone. Oh, I love otters. I love the rainforest. Happy World Rainforest Day. Woo woo.
Yay!
But people got to realize that if you're helping these places, you're helping the people too, because, you know, people are animals. We're primates. We're not aside from nature. We're part of it. We play a role in the ecosystem as well. And so I really wanted to jump on and share a little bit of my insight on it. I know y'all are going to be able to use your brains to see exactly how it's connected and share insight and teach us as well. And also this stems all from this man right here, Zach. And I'll explain a little story about that. So Zach right here, he actually reached out to me to do a talk at a place that he just started working at. And at first he was like, I don't know if he'll even, you know, take the advantage of that opportunity. And as soon as he did, I was like, don't take that opportunity away from me, because it's a lot. Like I talk about many of your organizations, the ones that are working here. Shout out to Wild Earth Allies. That's my first initial link into all of this. And I told them, don't take that opportunity away. You shoot your shot. If they say no, think of positive ways to how you can either prove it or get back around to it. But most of these people, like all of y'all, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've been there, we've done that, we know the struggle. And as soon as we see someone that's trying to learn, we're over here trying to share. We see someone that asks, then we prioritize everything we have to do. And if we see that, you know what, that person wants to know, we got to plant that seed, or the seed's already been planted. Actually, let me correct what I say. We got to start watering that seed, and we got to see how that seed starts growing. And if it starts growing good, we put more water to it. And so him reaching out to me, at first I responded like, oh, if I'm off, I'll be there. I got off the phone. 5 minutes later, I go, that's a priority to me right now. I'm going to be off. Called my boss. Boss was really cool about it. I happen to work at a place that deals with and contributes to conservation. So, but that's not the end all be all. But he was really cool about it. He understood who I am and what my goals are and stuff. And so then I started planning and thinking of all the positive ways that this can be impactful, because every situation, you can make it a positive one. It's not about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to it. Thinking about the positive ways that it helps you grow. If you don't believe me, try a little test. Look at something that you thought was a negative situation a day ago, 5 days ago, a year ago. Think about how you responded to it. Think about the new information you have and how you would now, and then see that you've grown. So remember that and continue to go into the path that you're interested in and continue to learn and grow. Put yourself in those uncomfortable situations and grow. So a great example, he reached out to me. It became a priority to me because of my purpose. So I go there and nothing like it was expected actually happened. But there were so many benefits. And one, he succeeded because he did it. Two, other people got to see that he did it, and it builds more reinforcement and who he is and what he says going forward. Three, I went into it with the goal of, I'm going to give this speech to everyone. This is going to be my first speech where I'm being asked as myself and not affiliated with anyone, so I can promote all the organizations that I know and have some kind of personal connection to. Wild Earth Allies, Global Conservation Force, Draft Conservation Foundation, International Rhino Foundation, and many, many more, because there's so many out there. So if you're watching right now, if you like something, there are many places out there you can look into it, and you can find convenient ways in your everyday life, especially something that you enjoy doing that can still contribute and help. So back to Zach, right? So Zach did this. I come in there. Oh, do you have it? I'm sorry. Did you have?
Well, I'm going to stop you because I want everybody to be able to respond.
Thank you.
This idea, and so I'm going to stop you right there because I think you bring up a really good point, and I want to put an exclamation point on it. So we're all educators, right? And that once we become passionate, which you obviously are, which is so fantastic, that we all take on this shared responsibility to continue to educate the people around us. And I just want to give the panel a moment to respond to that. And I'm also keeping my eye on the time. So Megan, Ava, Ro, do you want to jump in?
I do, actually. I was thinking about it. What's your name? Because you're not Zach, you're...
So I go by Timothy, also known as Rhino TC on IG. That's my superhero power that I deal with.
Okay. Timothy, I caught on to some of your words, right? You said plant the seed, which is excellent for World Rainforest Day, right? We love planting seeds around here. You said positively support, and then realize that sometimes nothing you expect to happen is what is actually going to happen. And you have to, not have to, but you encourage others to continue the path that is their own path. And I love that. I think that applies in so many different ways. As a teacher, we do plant seeds. We support our students, however that seed grows. And then we realize that sometimes nothing that is expected to happen actually ends up happening. And I love all of your enthusiasm and all of your passion. And somebody did those three things for you somewhere along the way. I hope that you have been able to go back and acknowledge those people that in your life that did that. And then just as an aside, you got me thinking about something that we haven't mentioned yet. And that is when we're talking about the rainforest and when we're talking about conservation, sometimes we get into really heavy content, really deep content that can be hard to process, especially for developing minds and bodies. And so we do, and what caught me was the word positive. We need to make sure that we find places to insert positivity into our messaging about conservation. It's not always this dark and dire thing, and that there are great things happening in conservation, that there are great advantages. I'm sorry, that's not the right word. Great leaps and bounds that we have taken to promote positive movements in conservation. So, even if this is the final note, because we just have a couple seconds left, really make sure that you're getting positive things in there. Stories really help. All of that is super, super important. And so thank you, Timothy, for sharing your passion with all of us. Again, I encourage you to go back. Thank the people who watered your plant and made sure that you had support to grow.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Megan. That's a really good place to stop. And thanks, Timothy, for jumping in. I want to make sure everybody can get to the keynote, which is going to be fantastic. And I know that's coming up. I also want to, hopefully you all can see this QR code nice and large. This is where you can scan. It will take you right to our site. You can check out all of the resources that have been developed by this fantastic group and our whole network. Learn more about our programming, and that's where you can go. I want to say a giant thank you to World Rainforest Day for having us today, for the work that you do. This is so exciting to see such numbers coming in to have these discussions, and thanks to everybody for jumping into the discussion today. I want to thank the panelists for their work, Ava, Ro, Megan. I want to thank you for what you do and who you are in this world. There are so many ripples out from all of the goodness that you are. Please do check us out. Please scan that QR code. Please come visit us on our website. And everybody have a wonderful rest of your World Rainforest Day. Take good care.